The dim glow of a flickering candle barely lit the small, cold house where Aisha sat on the worn-out wooden floor, her delicate hands clutching a tattered cloth as she wiped away silent tears. The walls, once white, had long since faded into a dull shade of neglect, much like her own existence in this house. The air was heavy with the scent of burnt oil from the kitchen, where her stepmother, Linda, stood with arms crossed, her sharp eyes filled with disdain. "You lazy girl." Linda's shrill voice cut through the silence like a blade. "Didn't I tell you to finish cleaning the dishes? Why do I have to repeat myself 1,000 times?" I was just about to," Aisha stammered, quickly standing up, her frail body trembling from exhaustion. "Excuses? That's all you ever have." Linda marched toward her, snatching the cloth from Aisha's hands and throwing it onto the ground. "You're just like your mother, useless and weak." The words stung deeper than any slap ever could. Aisha lowered her gaze, biting her lip to stop herself from breaking down. She had never known her mother, but she had often imagined her as someone kind and gentle, someone who would have shielded her from this misery. Linda scoffed, running a hand through her perfectly styled hair before turning away. "Your father may be blind to your worthlessness, but I see you for what you are. You will never amount to anything, Aisha. Never." As soon as Linda disappeared into her room, Aisha collapsed onto the floor, gripping the edges of her dress tightly. A deep sob threatened to escape her lips, but she forced it down, swallowing the pain like she had done for years. She wished she could tell her father, tell him how much she suffered under Linda's cruelty. But he was always working late, always too tired to notice the bruises, the sadness in her eyes, the weight of unspoken words pressing against her chest. When he came home, he only saw what Linda wanted him to see. "Aisha is a little careless, but don't worry, darling. I'm teaching her how to be responsible," Linda would say with a sweet smile, her voice dripping with false concern. And her father, weary from long hours at work, would nod and sigh, too trusting, too oblivious. "I'm glad you're guiding her, Linda. I don't know what I'd do without you." Without you. The words echoed painfully in Aisha's heart. Every night, she lay on the cold, hard mattress in the small storeroom where Linda had forced her to sleep, staring at the cracks in the ceiling. Dreams were a luxury she couldn't afford, yet she allowed herself one. A life beyond these walls. A place where kindness wasn't a weakness, where love wasn't conditional. But dreams, she reminded herself bitterly, were for people who had the power to change their fate. And she was just a girl trapped in a story where she was nothing more than an unwanted burden. The sky was a deep shade of charcoal, heavy with the weight of an impending storm. The wind howled through the empty streets, rustling through Aisha's loose shawl as she hurried home, her footsteps echoing against the wet pavement. Rain began to fall. Soft at first, then harder, drumming against the rooftops and pooling in the uneven cracks of the road. She clutched her worn-out bag to her chest, shivering as the cold droplets soaked through her thin clothes. A sudden, deafening crash split the silence. Aisha's heart lurched. Her eyes darted toward the source of the noise. A sleek black car skidded violently across the slippery road, tires screeching in agony before slamming into a lamppost. The impact sent sparks flying as the pole bent at an unnatural angle, flickering wildly before plunging the street into semi-darkness. For a moment, there was nothing but the relentless patter of rain. Then, movement. Aisha's breath caught in her throat as she saw a figure inside the wrecked car. The windshield was cracked, jagged like a spider's web. A man, his head resting against the steering wheel, his body unnaturally still. Blood trickled down his forehead, mixing with the rainwater that seeped through the broken window. She glanced around. The street was eerily deserted. No one had witnessed the accident except her. "Someone help!" Aisha shouted, but her voice was swallowed by the storm. Panic surged through her veins, but she forced herself to move. Rushing forward, she pulled at the handle of the car door. Locked. She banged on the window. No response. Her mind raced. She had no phone. Linda never let her have one. But she couldn't leave him like this. Desperation overpowered fear as she gripped the sharp edge of a broken window and yanked. The glass bit into her palm, drawing blood, but she didn't care. "Sir, can you hear me?" A faint groan. Encouraged, she reached inside and unlatched the door. It swung open with a creak, revealing the man slumped against the seat. His white shirt was stained with blood, his dark hair damp from the rain. Even in the dim light, Aisha could see that he was young, perhaps in his late 20s. "Sir, wake up. You need to stay awake." His eyelids fluttered. A weak, pained breath escaped his lips. "Who?" "You were in an accident. I'm calling for help." Her hands trembled as she reached inside, feeling for his phone. She found it on the floor of the car, the screen shattered but still working. With hurried fingers, she dialed emergency services. "There's been a crash. A man is injured, he's bleeding and unconscious. Please send an ambulance quickly." The operator asked for the location. Aisha rattled off the nearest landmark, her voice thick with urgency. "Stay with him," the dispatcher instructed. "Help is on the way." Aisha turned back to the man, whose breathing was uneven. She hesitated before carefully placing a hand on his shoulder. His body was warm despite the cold night, his pulse faint but steady beneath her fingertips. "It's okay?" she whispered. "Help is coming." His eyes fluttered open slightly, deep brown and filled with pain. He looked at her, no, through her, like he was searching for something he couldn't quite place. "You." His voice was hoarse, barely audible over the rain. "You stayed?" Aisha nodded, blinking back tears she didn't understand. "Of course, I couldn't leave you here." His lips parted as if he wanted to say something else, but his strength failed him. His hand twitched slightly, and Aisha, moved by instinct, took it in hers. "You're going to be fine," she reassured him. "Just hold on a little longer." The rain poured harder, drenching both of them. But she didn't care. She focused on the rhythmic rise and fall of his chest, willing him to hold on. Then, the distant wail of an ambulance. Red and blue lights flashed against the wet pavement as the vehicle skidded to a stop. Paramedics rushed out, assessing the situation. One of them placed a firm hand on Aisha's shoulder, gently pulling her away. "We've got him from here, miss." Aisha hesitated. A strange, inexplicable emotion gripped her chest as she watched them lift the man onto a stretcher. His hand, which had been gripping hers just moments ago, fell limp at his side. "Will he be okay?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. One of the paramedics gave her a reassuring nod. "He's lucky you found him. You may have just saved his life." Aisha exhaled a shaky breath, relief washing over her like a wave. But just as she was about to respond, she saw his fingers twitch again. His lips moved slightly, forming silent words. His eyes, though dazed, searched for her. In that fleeting moment, something unspoken passed between them. Aisha's heart pounded. It felt as though time itself had stopped, trapping them in this single instant. A moment neither of them could understand, yet neither could deny. But then, a siren blared, a car door slammed shut, she snapped out of her daze. The ambulance doors closed, the vehicle rumbled to life. Panic flared in her chest. She had no name, no way of knowing who he was, and soon he would be gone. She should say something, ask who he was, tell him her name, something. But fear gripped her. She was just Aisha, a girl with no place in the grand scheme of life. What did it matter, if he remembered her? Before she could convince herself otherwise, she turned and ran. She disappeared into the night, her figure vanishing like a ghost in the storm. The ambulance sped away, carrying the injured stranger toward an uncertain fate. But as Ethan lay unconscious, his mind barely clinging to reality, one thought remained, floating through the darkness of his pain. Who was she? In the hospital, Ethan drifted in and out of consciousness. He heard the hum of machines, the distant chatter of nurses, the soft beeping of monitors, but through it all, one image burned in his mind, her face. He didn't know her name, didn't know where she had come from, but the warmth of her hand in his, the sound of her voice, he needed to find her. Aisha, on the other hand, lay awake in her small bed, staring at the ceiling. Her heart ached in a way she couldn't explain. She should forget him, forget the way his eyes had locked onto hers, desperate and searching. But she knew, deep down, that fate was not finished with them yet. And somewhere, in the vast city, Ethan vowed he would find her. Aisha sat by the window, staring at the sky as the last traces of sunlight melted into the horizon. The faint echoes of laughter from the street below felt foreign to her. Happiness, love, and freedom were luxuries she had never known. The heavy burden of her stepmother Linda's greed and cruelty weighed on her, crushing every dream she had ever dared to nurture. Linda paced across the room, her mind racing with calculations. Money was all that mattered to her, and Aisha was just an obstacle. an extra mouth to feed, a burden she was desperate to get rid of. She had already squandered the small inheritance Aisha's late father had left. Now, she had a new plan. Aisha was young and beautiful. Surely someone would marry her. And if she played her cards right, she could even profit from it. Ethan Grayson, heir to a vast fortune, had never forgotten the girl who had once saved his life. Years ago, he had been attacked in a dark alley, bleeding and weak, when a young girl had come to his rescue, giving him water, shelter, and care. Before he could even ask for her name, she had disappeared into the night. That girl had been Aisha. Ever since then he had searched for her, but she was nowhere to be found. But now, fate had given him a lead. Aisha lived under Linda's oppressive rule, suffering in silence. And Ethan was determined to rescue her. Disguising himself as a struggling commoner, he approached Linda, feigning desperation. He told her he had fallen on hard times but wanted a wife who would support him through his struggles. Linda's eyes gleamed with opportunity. A man with nothing? That meant she could control the marriage entirely and perhaps extort money from him later. Pretending to be generous, she agreed to the match, accepting a small sum from Ethan, money she believed was all he had. Aisha, silent as ever, accepted her fate without protest. It wasn't as if she had a choice. She had never been given one. She had spent years being treated like a servant, belittled and unloved. A marriage to a poor man? What did it matter? At least it would take her away from Linda. She had long given up on the idea of love. The wedding was a simple affair, devoid of celebration. Aisha barely looked at Ethan as they exchanged vows. She didn't expect kindness or happiness. She expected nothing at all. But Ethan was different. He was gentle, patient, and kind in a way she had never known. He didn't raise his voice or demand obedience. He watched her with quiet fascination, as if she were the most precious thing in the world. Slowly, cracks began to form in the walls Aisha had built around her heart. One night, as they sat together under the stars outside their modest home, Ethan finally spoke the words that had been weighing on his heart. "Aisha," he said softly, "do you remember the night you saved a wounded man in the alley?" Aisha froze. How could he know about that? It was a memory she had buried deep, never expecting it to surface. Her lips parted in surprise. How do you know about that?" Ethan smiled, his eyes filled with warmth. "Because that man was me." Aisha gasped, her heart pounding wildly in her chest. Her mind raced, connecting the pieces. You were that man?" He nodded. "I've spent years searching for you, Aisha. You saved my life, and I swore I'd find you one day. When I discovered how you were being treated, I couldn't just stand by." Tears welled up in Aisha's eyes. No one had ever cared about her like this. No one had ever searched for her, fought for her. Her entire life had been one of loneliness and suffering, but here was this man, looking at her as if she was the most important person in the world. "But why didn't you tell me?" she whispered, overwhelmed by emotion. "I needed you to trust me first," Ethan admitted. "I didn't want you to think I was another person trying to control your life. I wanted you to see that you are more than just someone's burden. You are someone's dream." Aisha broke down, sobbing into her hands. For the first time in years, she felt something stir within her. Hope. Ethan reached out, gently tilting her chin up so their eyes met. "Aisha, I don't care about wealth or status. I only care about you. I want to give you the happiness you've always been denied. But I won't force anything on you. If you don't want this marriage, you are free to leave. I will make sure you are safe, no matter what." Aisha stared at him, her heart hammering. No one had ever given her a choice before. No one had ever given her the freedom to decide for herself. And for the first time she realized she didn't want to leave. Slowly, hesitantly, she reached for his hand. "I don't want to go," she whispered. Ethan smiled, his eyes shining with love. He pulled her into a gentle embrace, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. Over the next few weeks their bond deepened. Ethan showered Aisha with kindness, never rushing her, always letting her set the pace. He introduced her to books, music, and the simple joys of life that she had never been allowed to experience. With every passing day, Aisha found herself smiling more, laughing more. She was slowly coming back to life. One evening, as they walked along the riverbank, Ethan took her hands in his. "Aisha, I love you." Her breath hitched, She had never heard those words before, never believed they could be meant for her. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she whispered, "I love you too." Ethan kissed her softly, his lips lingering as if trying to pour all his love into that single moment. It was a kiss of promises, of new beginnings, but their happiness was soon threatened. Linda discovered the truth, that Ethan was not a poor man, but a wealthy heir. Furious at being deceived, she stormed into their home demanding compensation. "You tricked me," she shrieked. "You owe me for taking that girl off my hands." Ethan, calm yet firm, stepped in front of Aisha. "I owe you nothing. Aisha is not an object to be bought and sold." Linda's face twisted with rage, but she was no match for Ethan's unwavering determination. When she realized she had no power over them, she stormed out, leaving behind the very daughter she had once used as a bargaining chip. Aisha watched Linda go, feeling no sadness, only a sense of relief. She turned to Ethan, and for the first time, she felt truly free. With Ethan by her side, Aisha finally believed in love, in happiness, in the future. Her past no longer defined her. She was no longer a prisoner of fate. She was loved. And that was all that mattered. Aisha leaned back against the plush seat of the private jet, her fingers clutching the soft fabric of her dress. The opulence surrounding her felt surreal. Just a few days ago, she had been living a simple life, struggling to make ends meet, and now she was flying to an unknown destination with a husband who seemed to be a complete enigma. Ethan had been kind, gentle even, but the magnitude of his wealth was something she had never anticipated. She turned to him, her dark eyes filled with curiosity and a trace of doubt. "Ethan, I don't understand. You told me you were just a simple man, but this is far from simple." Ethan chuckled, his emerald eyes twinkling as he reached for her hand. "I never said I was poor, sweetheart. I just never wanted my wealth to be the reason you married me." Aisha swallowed hard, trying to make sense of everything. "So, who are you really?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan exhaled, running a hand through his dark hair. "All in good time, my love. For now, just trust me." Trust. It was a small word but carried the weight of 1,000 emotions. She wanted to believe him, but the secrecy gnawed at her. When they landed, a limousine whisked them away to a breathtaking resort on a private island. The staff greeted them with reverence, bowing slightly as they passed. Aisha's heart pounded. Who exactly had she married? That evening, Ethan led her to a secluded part of the beach where a candlelit dinner awaited them. The ocean waves murmured a soft melody, and the night sky was sprinkled with 1,000,000 stars. The scent of roses filled the air, and a gentle breeze played with her hair. It felt like a dream, too perfect to be real. Ethan pulled out her chair, his touch lingering for a moment as she sat down. "Tonight, I want to tell you everything," he said, his voice rich with emotion. "No more secrets." Aisha's pulse quickened. "I'm listening." Ethan took a deep breath. "The night we first met, do you remember?" Aisha frowned, trying to recall. "You mean when I saved you from those men in the alley?" He nodded. "Yes, that night changed my life. I was at my lowest, drowning in despair, and then you appeared, fierce and brave, shielding me without hesitation. You had no idea who I was, and yet you risked yourself for me. I knew in that moment that I had to find you again, that I had to make you mine." Aisha's breath hitched. "But how? We lost contact that night. I never saw you again." Ethan reached for her hands, his touch warm and reassuring. "I searched for you, Aisha. For years, I looked everywhere. But fate had other plans. When I found out about your struggles, about the pain you endured," his voice broke, and he looked away for a moment before continuing. "I couldn't stand by and do nothing. I orchestrated this marriage, not just to have you in my life, but to save you from that painful existence." Tears welled up in Aisha's eyes. You planned this?" Ethan nodded, his gaze locking onto hers. "Yes, because I love you, Aisha. I have loved you since that night. Every day, every moment, I dreamed of holding you, of making you happy, and now that I finally have you, I never want to let you go." Aisha was speechless. A whirlwind of emotions surged through her: shock, disbelief, but most of all, overwhelming love. She had spent years believing that life had nothing but suffering for her, and yet here was a man who had dedicated himself to ensuring her happiness. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice trembling, "I don't know what to say." He cupped her face gently, his thumb wiping away a stray tear. "Then don't say anything, just feel. Feel how much I love you, how much I cherish you. I don't care about the past, about where we came from. All I care about is our future together." Aisha's heart ached with the intensity of his words. She had always guarded herself against love, afraid of getting hurt. But with Ethan, it felt different. It felt real. A single tear slid down her cheek as she whispered, "I was so lost, Ethan, so alone. But you found me. You brought light into my darkness." Ethan leaned in, his forehead touching hers. "And I will spend the rest of my life proving to you that you are my everything." The sincerity in his voice shattered the last of her walls. Aisha closed her eyes, letting the warmth of his love seep into her soul. When she opened them again, she saw nothing but love in his eyes. "I love you too, Ethan," she finally confessed, her voice shaky yet sure. "I love you more than I ever thought possible." A slow, breathtaking smile spread across Ethan's face before he captured her lips in a kiss, sealing their love under the starry sky. The waves whispered their approval, and the candles flickered like tiny witnesses to their love story. That night, under the heavens, Aisha realized that fate had indeed brought them together. And she knew, without a doubt, that she was exactly where she was meant to be, in the arms of the man who had loved her long before she ever knew it. As the night deepened, Ethan and Aisha walked hand in hand along the shoreline, their footprints disappearing with each gentle wave. They talked about their dreams, their fears, and the life they wished to build together. Ethan promised to support Aisha's ambitions, encouraging her to chase her dreams fearlessly. Days passed in blissful tranquility. They explored hidden waterfalls, sailed under golden sunsets, and danced under the moonlight. Each moment brought them closer, strengthening their love. One evening, Ethan surprised Aisha with a handwritten journal filled with letters he had written to her over the years, never knowing if he would find her. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she read them, realizing just how deeply he had loved her even before they met again. The next morning, Aisha woke up to find a delicate note on her pillow, written in Ethan's elegant handwriting. "Today is the first day of the rest of our lives, my love. Let's make it unforgettable." A small velvet box lay beside it. With trembling hands, she opened it to reveal a delicate diamond bracelet, engraved with the words, "Forever yours." Tears of happiness filled her eyes as Ethan walked in, smiling. "Do you like it?" Aisha nodded, unable to speak. She threw her arms around him, holding him tightly. "I love you, Ethan. I truly do." Ethan kissed the top of her head. "And I will spend my life making sure you never doubt it." Together they embraced the promise of a new beginning, knowing that love had indeed found its way into their hearts forever. Linda had always been the kind of woman who believed she could manipulate fate. After marrying Aisha's father, she made it her mission to diminish Aisha's importance in the household, treating her more like a burden than a stepdaughter. She showered her own biological daughter, Sophie, with love and attention while making Aisha feel unwanted and unloved. Yet, through all of Linda's cruelty, Aisha never once lost the kindness in her heart. She endured the mistreatment silently, carrying herself with grace, believing that someday, life would grant her the love and happiness she longed for. Years passed, and Aisha left the toxic home behind to build a life of her own. She worked hard, pushing through all the obstacles life threw at her. While she had suffered from the absence of a loving family, she refused to let it define her. She built herself from the ground up, focusing on her education and career. And in the process, she found Ethan. Ethan was everything she had dreamed of in a man. He was kind, understanding, and fiercely protective of her. Their love story was nothing short of magical. Late-night walks under the city lights, whispered confessions in the moonlit quiet, and stolen kisses filled with promises of forever. Ethan loved her for who she was, not for where she came from. He saw the light in her. Even when she doubted it herself, their love grew deeper over time. And when Ethan proposed to her, Aisha felt as though she had finally found her place in the world. The moment was breathtaking. Ethan had taken her to a serene lakeside, the stars reflecting in the water like tiny diamonds. As he knelt down with a ring in his hand, his voice trembled with emotion. "Aisha, you are my heart, my home, and my happiness. Will you marry me?" Tears brimmed in Aisha's eyes as she nodded, unable to form words. Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into his embrace, sealing their love with a kiss that spoke of devotion and eternity. Meanwhile, Linda had assumed Aisha would remain a nobody, forever struggling, forever failing. She had never cared about Aisha's dreams or ambitions. So when she discovered, by sheer coincidence, that Ethan was not just any man but a millionaire businessman, she was left utterly speechless. Her heart pounded in disbelief. How could this happen? How could the girl she had belittled for years find a love so grand and a future so bright? The realization hit her like a storm, and for the first time in her life, Linda felt regret clawing at her chest. Desperate to regain control, Linda attempted to mend her ways. She reached out to Aisha, suddenly acting like the loving mother she had never been. She spoke sweetly, invited Aisha over, and even pretended to care about her well-being. But Aisha was no longer the naive girl who had once yearned for her stepmother's affection. She saw through the facade, the artificial smiles, and the calculated kindness. Linda's sudden change of heart wasn't because she had grown fond of Aisha, it was because she saw an opportunity, a way to insert herself into Ethan's wealth and power. Despite knowing Linda's true intentions, Aisha didn't respond with bitterness. She had found her strength, not in revenge, but in moving forward. She had a future filled with love and happiness, and she refused to let the shadows of her past dictate her joy. When Linda tried to express her regret, Aisha simply smiled and said, "I have no space for resentment in my heart. I have everything I need now." Ethan admired her even more for it. He had seen how much pain Linda had caused Aisha, yet here she was, rising above it all with grace and dignity. One evening, as they danced in their new home, swaying to the rhythm of a soft melody, Ethan held Aisha close and whispered against her hair, "You amaze me every day, my love. You choose love over hatred, strength over vengeance. I don't know what I did to deserve you." Aisha gazed up at him, her eyes reflecting the warmth of the candlelight. "You loved me when no one else did," she murmured. "You taught me what it means to be truly cherished." As Ethan kissed her deeply, the past felt like a distant echo, fading into the night. The pain was gone, replaced by a love so profound, so unbreakable, that nothing from before could tarnish it. Linda, on the other hand, was left with nothing but her regrets. She had lost the chance to be part of Aisha's happiness, and no amount of apologies could undo the past. Karma had arrived, not with rage or vengeance, but with a silent reminder that the love she had denied Aisha had found its way to her in the most beautiful form, a love that was strong, pure, and untouchable. As Aisha and Ethan continued their journey together, they proved that true strength lies in forgiveness, in choosing happiness over hatred. And as they built their life side by side, filled with laughter, passion, and unbreakable love, Aisha knew one thing for certain. She had won, not by seeking revenge, but by embracing the future that love had written for her. As time passed, Aisha and Ethan's love story flourished even more. They traveled the world together, making memories in breathtaking places. From watching the sunrise in Santorini to experiencing the magic of the northern lights in Norway, their bond only grew stronger. Every moment spent together was a testament to the love they had fought for, a love that had survived pain and betrayal. Linda, however, found herself sinking deeper into loneliness. Sophie, the daughter she had favored, had moved on with her own life, barely keeping in touch. The grand life Linda had imagined for herself had crumbled, leaving her with an emptiness she could no longer ignore. She often found herself staring at old family photos, realizing that her selfishness had cost her a relationship with the one person who had once craved her love the most. One day, Aisha received a letter from Linda. It was heartfelt, raw, and filled with regret. Linda admitted her mistakes, confessed to her selfishness, and acknowledged that she had lost the only real family she ever had. Aisha read the letter in silence, her heart torn between forgiveness and the pain of the past. But when she looked at Ethan, she knew that love had already shown her the path forward. She decided to meet Linda, not because she needed closure, but because she knew that kindness had the power to heal wounds that hatred never could. When they finally met, Linda broke down in tears, apologizing for all the years of cruelty. And in that moment, Aisha realized that she had truly won, not by holding on to anger, but by embracing love in all its forms. Life had given her everything she had ever dreamed of. And as she walked away, hand in hand with Ethan, she knew that the future held nothing but endless love and new beginnings. Aisha stood at the edge of the balcony, her gaze lost in the vast horizon where the golden hues of the setting sun melted into the tranquil blue of the ocean. A soft breeze played with her dark, flowing hair as she closed her eyes and let the memories of her past drift away like fallen autumn leaves. Once a helpless girl, she had now transformed into a woman of dignity, love, and a bright future. A journey that had been anything but easy. The past was filled with scars, but Ethan had been the light that guided her through the darkness. He had seen her not as a victim of circumstances, but as a warrior who had fought against all odds. His love had been unwavering, patient, and pure. And tonight, as he approached her, his deep blue eyes filled with nothing but admiration, Aisha felt the warmth of love settle deep in her heart. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. You know, every time I see you like this, lost in thought, I wonder what I did to deserve you, he murmured, his voice laced with affection. Aisha turned to face him, her dark eyes reflecting the twinkling city lights. It's me who wonders, Ethan. You gave me a reason to believe in love when I had lost all hope. You saw the real me even when I couldn't. Ethan cupped her face gently. You are the strongest person I've ever met, Aisha. I didn't save you, you saved yourself. I just held your hand and walked beside you. Tears welled up in her eyes, not of sadness, but of overwhelming love. She leaned into his touch, her heart beating in perfect rhythm with his. You made me believe that love isn't a fairy tale, it's real, it's raw, and it's worth fighting for. He smiled, brushing away a stray tear with his thumb. And I promise, I will keep fighting for us, for you, for the love we share, always. Aisha inhaled sharply, the intensity of his words making her heart swell with emotion. Ethan, she whispered, her voice trembling, will you promise me something? Anything, my love. Promise me that no matter where life takes us, we will always hold on to each other, that no storm, no distance, no fear will ever make us let go. Ethan took her hands in his gaze never wavering. Aisha, I vow to cherish you, to stand by your side through every storm, to love you even in our weakest moments. You are my heart, my soul, my forever. Aisha felt a tear slip down her cheek, but this time, she let it. Love wasn't just about the happy moments, it was about holding on even when things seemed uncertain. And she knew, in this very moment, that Ethan was her forever. The world around them faded as their lips met in a tender, passionate kiss, sealing their promises in a way words never could. The stars above bore witness to their love, and the moon shone a little brighter that night, as if blessing their union. As they pulled away, Aisha rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart. I never thought I'd find a love like this. Ethan pressed a kiss on her hair. Sometimes love finds us when we least expect it, but exactly when we need it the most. Aisha closed her eyes, feeling at peace. And I will spend the rest of my life making sure I never take it for granted. Ethan tightened his hold around her. Together, always. The night stretched on as they stood there, wrapped in each other's warmth, knowing that no matter what challenges the future held, they had already won. Because love, kindness, and fate always worked in mysterious ways, leading hearts to where they truly belonged. Days turned into weeks, and their love only deepened. Ethan would often surprise Aisha with small gestures, flowers left on her bedside table, handwritten notes filled with words of admiration, or even simple walks in the park where they would dream about their future together. One evening, as they sat by the fireplace, Ethan took Aisha's hand in his. I want to build a life with you, Aisha. Not just today, not just tomorrow, but forever. Aisha looked at him, her heart swelling with joy. What kind of life do you see for us? Ethan smiled. A life filled with laughter, with warmth, with late-night talks and morning kisses. A home where love is in every corner, where we grow old together, where every challenge only makes us stronger. Aisha leaned into him, her voice soft. That sounds like a dream. He kissed her forehead. Then let's make it our reality. Months later, under a sky full of twinkling stars, Ethan got down on one knee, holding a ring that shimmered in the moonlight. Aisha, you are my heart, my home, my everything. Will you marry me? Tears of happiness streamed down Aisha's face as she nodded, unable to find the words. She pulled him into a tight embrace, Yes, 1,000 times yes. And with that, their journey took another beautiful turn. A love story not just of passion, but of resilience, trust, and unwavering devotion. Because in the end, love wasn't about perfect moments. It was about standing together, hand in hand, through every storm, every sunshine, and every chapter of life that awaited them.